Welcome to the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council with hosts Grace Evans and Moses Brattrud. Stay informed on the top stories on life, family, and religious freedom. Get the facts, stand for truth. Hello and welcome back to the Family Beacon podcast. My name is Grace Evans. I'm here with Moses Brattrud. And wow, guys, happy December. It is crazy.
Happy Advent.
Happy Advent. That is a better thing to say. It is crazy to me. I feel like it was just August. It was hot outside. I was sitting at the beach reading books. School hadn't even started. And suddenly it's Advent.
It's amazing how fast. Yeah.
Wow. We will be talking about Advent briefly in this podcast episode, but first, we have a few other things to talk to you about. The first being the Disrespect for Marriage Act, which we have talked about before. We're going to give you an update on that piece of radical legislation. I will also be sharing a story about abortion extremism in the UK that you all should be aware of. It's really saddening what's happening over there with regard to children with disabilities, actually. And then we will also discuss something that happened here in Burnsville, Moses. Some basically parental rights are being stripped away here in Minnesota in the district of Burnsville. We'll talk about that more. And of course, we'll talk about Advent, and then we'll talk about what we're reading. So let's go ahead and jump right on in to the Disrespect for Marriage Act. Tell us, they've already been listening to the podcast episodes, so they kind of know what it is, but maybe just give them a brief summary in case they've missed one or two, and then tell us what went down this week.
Right. So, yes, we have discussed the Respect for Marriage Act, which we call the Disrespect for Marriage Act, several times, I think at least twice in the podcast. So I won't go into the details now. Every time that it's come up for legislative action, we've talked about it because it is so important, but I don't feel the need to go back to the beginning on this. However, broadly, we're talking about a bill that would make homosexual marriage federal law. Currently, the state of it is that under the Burnville case from 2015, it's legal, but this would codify it at the federal level, and it has a couple far-reaching consequences for religious freedom. In a sense, you know, it's not surprising, given the cultural climate that we're in, that certain people would push for this bill to be passed. But what is surprising is really just how hostile it actually is to religious freedom. So first of all, the bill creates what's called a private right of action. So anybody who believes that they've been victimized in any way by some type of organization that does not support homosexual marriage will be able to sue that organization, that church, whatever it is.
So would this include, say, if there was like a lesbian wanted to work at a church, and then the church said, no, we're not going to hire you based on that?
Churches, in theory, have very strong constitutional protections that would keep them from
adoption
being subject
agencies.
to that. Yeah. A lot of the threat has been described as specifically for Christian nonprofits that aren't churches, such as
like
adoption
us.
agencies, or schools. I don't want to get too deep into like specific threats because
we could have our attorney on to talk
we could have our
that.
attorney Renee Carlson discuss that. So definitely, you know, we've already seen, and we will already see more Supreme Court litigation on religious freedom. Religious freedom is always being threatened because there's people who have a very different and very limited idea of what religious freedom is, and then there's people who have more of a big idea of what religious freedom is, and we are certainly on that side of things. So this would certainly vilify millions of Americans who believe in natural heterosexual marriage as ordained by God, and that belief would be labeled, quote, sex discrimination. One author I saw said that would become a cultural sin, quote unquote, tantamount to the way racism is treated in our culture, which, you know, is it just, I always hate that comparison, and I think we've discussed this once or twice, but like, when we're talking about racism, we're talking about an actual sin identified in the Bible, show no partiality,
James,
and no division within the body of Christ based on Jew or Greek or any other ethnicity or race. And then we're also talking about yes, real historic wrongs perpetrated by people of X race against Y race and vice versa. And those things are wrongs that need to be righted, and biblical justice needs to be found. When we talk about, and so the claim that LGBTQ rights, quote unquote, are just the same as that, that essentially, the claim basically is that
you're discriminating in person.
Right. If homosexuals aren't able to marry someone of the same sex, if 15-year-olds aren't able to get double mastectomies because they identify as transgender, then that's essentially the same as slavery. Like that's how grave of a sin it is. Right. That's the rhetorical claim. It's disgusting, really. But also it's just so wrong. It's based on a comparison that's just not valid.
And I don't want to be like too depressing about this, but it is sad to me because of the fact that with America's young, right? With the founding of America.
Although it is actually the oldest democracy in the world.
Oh, wow. So anyways, basically what I'm trying to say is it's a pretty young country. And we were trying to do something completely different, and we succeeded in doing something completely different and in creating, in my opinion, like the freest nation in the world. And it's just sad to see our own citizens, our own legislators walking that back. And the more I just think about history, the more I think, wow, like, have we really learned nothing from history? Have we tried to establish this great country, succeeded in establishing this great country, only for people to rise up that want to strip freedom away, which is crazy. It really is. So yeah, I don't want to be too depressing, you guys, but that's just something that's been going through my mind. There is something that you can do, something you can do to take action.
Yeah, I should say, so the next step on this bill, actually, let me get to that in just a second.
Okay.
I wanted to say, first of all, and I'm quoting here an article from the Washington Stand. By creating a private right of action, the so-called Respect for Marriage Act will empower individuals to target and harass religious organizations and individuals wherever they find them. These are people, he says, who want Christianity to die, historic Christianity, but they will settle for burying it alive in legal costs. And I thought that was actually a good line, because
that is a good line.
In this country, everyone we're a very litigious nation. Americans love to sue each other. And we have a huge court system, and the court system generally works the way it's designed to do, but it's designed in a way that encourages basically frivolous lawsuits and encourages people kind of legal adventurism would be my term for it, where people sue because they think there's even just a small chance of being able to win. However, I'm not a legal expert, so I'll stop my legal analysis there and just say, agreeing to what Grace said, this is shocking to see in a country that has the strongest tradition of religious freedom in the entire world to pass a bill that's so
well put.
so
radical, anti-freedom.
Yeah, radically against it. So the next I'll tell you
take action.
I'll tell you who I reached out to yesterday. Yesterday I had a conversation with our boss, John Helmberger.
Okay.
And we we're like, it's really sad. It's not surprising, but it's sad that our senators, Senator Klobuchar and Senator Smith, voted for this bill. And of course they're patting themselves on the back for protecting LGBTQ rights as they see it. And so I emailed their communications directors.
Wow.
Yeah, and I said we'd love to have Senator Klobuchar, separately Senator Smith, on the podcast.
Good for you, Moses. That's great.
I said, we have questions about we wonder, Senator, whether you took the religious freedom considerations that millions of Minnesotans have.
It'd be fascinating to hear their opinion on the podcast.
Yeah. So I haven't heard back. I just emailed them a day ago. I probably won't hear back, unfortunately. I was, of course, very respectful. I promised a platform and a good faith conversation. So if anybody here has a contact with Senator Klobuchar or Senator Smith, we would love to discuss this subject with either or both of them, because we really want them to understand the concerns that religious Minnesotans have, and presumably Minnesotans who don't have specific religious faith, but who because the right of conscience is also something protected in our Constitution.
Yeah.
So what's next? This bill it was passed by the House already, but now it will be, and then it was changed in the Senate. So now it has to go back to the House. Apparently, the timeline is very short. Apparently, it will be up for a vote possibly within the next 2 weeks.
I'm thinking of that Schoolhouse Rock jingle, like where if a bill can die if it takes too long. Like,
I don't know that one.
Oh, it's so funny.
That would be nice. Yeah, no, I think the bill could die if something happened that kept it from being voted on through the end of the year, because or through January, whenever the new legislature
Which is so weird that they're voting on it now. Can you tell us why they're even doing this now? Like, I know it was an accelerated, like, so I haven't really followed the logistics. I don't know the specific terminology that's used.
Well, the Democrats lost the U.S. House in this recent election, so this is called a lame duck session.
A lame duck session.
Right. So, and there's always a lot of weird stuff that comes up in a lame duck session. Stuff that people didn't do because the election was going on and they were more focused on that, or just stuff that they know they can't do once the new Congress is sworn in. So we'll see what happens. We expect, however, sadly, that this will, in the current makeup, that this will pass the U.S. House again, and that it will go straight to President Biden's desk, and that he will sign it, and that he will make a big deal out of it.
Right.
So what you can do is we're grateful for 3 congresspeople in Minnesota who stood up and voted no on this bill. That's Congresswoman Michelle Fischbach, Congressman Pete Stauber, and Congressman Brad Finstad. All 3 of them won their reelection bid, so they'll be well, even if they didn't actually, they would be able to vote on it. We're really disappointed in Representative Tom Emmer. Representative Emmer voted
yes.
for this bill in the House.
That is shocking to me.
And it was a bill which, to my understanding, was even worse before it got some additional language added in the Senate on religious freedom. Although, just to be clear, we don't believe that the language that was added in the Senate did anything to make it actually better from a religious freedom standpoint. So, Congressman Emmer, we're very disappointed. Congressman Emmer is now the 4th highest-ranking Republican in the U.S. House. He is the majority whip. He has a position of huge power and influence, and it's really sad to see him disrespecting people of faith in his district and across the state, and indeed across the country, by voting for this bill. So we urge Congressman Emmer to reconsider his vote. He's been strong on other issues, and we're grateful for that. And we ask him to reconsider his vote and consider a vote for traditional marriage, a vote for religious freedom. And we're also really grateful for the 3 representatives that I mentioned who voted against it, and we're asking you to encourage them to vote no when that comes back up for a vote. So I have not created it yet, but there will be an action alert that will allow you to send a message to your representative, either asking them to vote no on that, whether or not they voted no the first time, asking them to vote no on this second time. So that's a big deal. That's probably the biggest federal issue that we're watching right now. If we take a look, and so that's Washington. If we take a look, though, across the Atlantic, Grace, what's interesting about this issue with the United Kingdom is that some of the stuff with this abortion law, even though it's a completely different country, it's actually some of the same backlash to Roe v. Wade being overturned, which is weird. Like, I've seen that mentioned. It's because we're the
leader of the world, in my opinion. So everyone's looking to us, and they're seeing, oh, wow, after 50 years, America actually overturned this law. Is it coming for us? Like, our quote unquote abortion rights going to be taken away?
Yeah.
So, let's dive in.
So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so basically in the UK, I didn't know this specifically until this week when I saw this headline, but in the UK, Moses, abortion can be carried out until 24 weeks, unless the unborn baby is suspected of having a fetal anomaly, so a disability, in which case the baby can be aborted up until the moment of birth. Disgusting. And so when I saw that, I was shocked, because really what this law says then in the UK is that we're going to limit abortion at 24 weeks because that's a cutoff. It's an arbitrary cutoff. Of course, we don't agree with it, but they're cutting it off there because they're like, okay, after then the baby is developed enough. It's a baby. It's a human. We should protect it. But their argument then is, well, if a baby might have a disability, that baby isn't worthy of protection. We can just kill it at any possible time. And so really what you're seeing is the most grave discrimination against very vulnerable people. And so Heidi Crowder, who is 27, she is a UK citizen, and she has Down syndrome. And so she recently challenged this terrible law. She's challenged it multiple times, actually. I think this was at least her second time, maybe more than that. But she challenged the law on the grounds that it is a clear, quote, instance of inequality regarding people with conditions like her own, and that it is incompatible with the European Convention on Human Rights. And so she lost the legal challenge in September of last year to the High Court in the UK. So she took it to the Court of Appeal, and unfortunately it was shot down yet again. So commenting on the ruling that said, no, we don't see Down syndrome babies or babies with disabilities as worthy of life, they basically, she stated, I am very upset that babies with Down syndrome can be aborted up to birth. This tells me I am not valued and of much less value than a person without Down syndrome. I am angry that the judges say that my feelings don't matter. That makes me feel I am not as valuable as a person without Down syndrome, which is very accurate, and so heartbreaking. And so she has vowed, nevertheless, even though she has faced all this opposition, she has vowed to take this case to the Supreme Court, which I think just reminded me so much of William Wilberforce. William Wilberforce eradicated slavery after his entire life of working towards that. And he was shot down so many times. If you look at history, if you study what he did, he went back again and again, every session with a law. Sometimes he would alter it a little bit, but he would every time get them to vote on it. And every time he would be shot down until his deathbed, actually, is when he got the news that he had, in fact, won. He had dedicated his life to that. And so I commend Heidi for not basically giving up and just saying, oh, I didn't win, let me sit back down, and there's nothing I can do to change the narrative. Actually, in England, William Wilberforce did much the same thing for his entire life and won on something that was obviously a big human rights crisis. And so Heidi has also stated that while she is very upset not to win again, she will keep on fighting because, quote, we have already informed and changed hearts and minds and changed people's opinions about this law. And so I think that just really hits it. That's something that puts it into perspective of what's happening in a different country, right, than America. And for me, just when I think of this, I think of something that's often brought up to me, which is grace. If I don't really like abortion grace, but if a kid is going to suffer in the world, if a kid is going to be born into poverty or have a severe disability, isn't it more loving to abort them? Because then they won't have to suffer in the world. Like, that's an argument I hear all the time. And really the best response to this, in my opinion, is to say, I hear what you're saying, but what do you think of this? Imagine you were in a third world country. Imagine you were visiting and you saw a child who was 2 years old, starved, malnourished, ribs sticking out of his chest, and he had such a poor quality of life. He suffered so much. And you could even say he had a disability in this case. And so his quality of life was so poor. Perhaps he's an orphan. Perhaps he barely has enough to eat every day. However, do you think that we should end his life? Should we do that because he suffers so much? And every time I talk to someone, they're like, no, we shouldn't end his life. And I say, then you and I agree. We should work to end the suffering, not the sufferer.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's the bottom line with this. And it's, I think we need to work to do that. We can work together to do that. And another thing to note is that we never know with absolute certainty that a child will have a disability.
No.
You can predict it sometimes, but many, many times, especially children with Down syndrome, are misdiagnosed and they are born and they don't have Down syndrome. And even if they do have Down syndrome, they are worthy of life because our life is not, our value of our life, I should say, is not contingent on what we give to society, right? It is not contingent on anything because it's just something we inherently have from God.
I wanted to say something about fetal testing as well because, I'm a parent and I do understand something of what it would be like to, be looking at the ultrasound and something doesn't seem right, and my wife and I have not had to face that ourselves. But I can imagine how devastating that would be. And I hope that we would have the courage to choose life in any event. But what's interesting with fetal testing as it's available now, it's generally quite invasive, and it actually can pose a risk to the survival of the baby. To even test to confirm that there is the presence of Down syndrome or not. So my understanding is that healthy babies have been hurt or even have died due to fetal testing, that just to confirm that they have Down syndrome or not. I've said I'm not a lawyer. Now you have to also know that I'm not a doctor either, but that is what I've heard. And I just think there's just this idea of medical tests can solve everything, and this is a slightly different topic from what you're talking about. Yes, everyone is worthy of life. That includes every human being. But it also, we don't even need to necessarily know what problem someone is going to have when they come out of the womb, as long as we know that the baby is alive, heartbeat and things like that. Those are the crucial things. So I'm pretty much against invasive fetal testing to figure out what if any, disability some child might have.
Another note kind of on just children with Down syndrome too is they are the happiest people in the world. They're the happiest people that you will ever meet. They are so joyful. They love life, and they are a huge blessing. Yes, I'm sure it is hard. It is hard at times to be parents, especially depending on different degrees of Down syndrome. I'm sure it's hard. I'm sure it's trying, but it's also a huge blessing. I've heard countless testimonies of women, of fathers, of saying, I'm so grateful we chose life, and I'm so grateful for my child. And so they are absolutely worthy of life. I want to end with this quote from the Society for the Protection of Unborn Children, which is the leading pro-life organization in the UK. They stated, "We hope that this case will open society's eyes to the discrimination inherent in all abortion, that a human being can be killed because they are, quote, unwanted or inconvenient, the wrong gender, or simply too young and vulnerable to protect themselves." And I think that's a good summary of what we've talked about. So yeah, we need to keep speaking up about the unborn, keep speaking up about the humanity and the value of those with disabilities, because they need our protection. They are vulnerable in this world, and at times, like unborn children, they don't have a voice to speak up for themselves. So we are that voice. In other news, actually coming back into the States and specifically into Minnesota, I want to talk about something that happened in Burnsville, a big blow to parental rights. So the Burnsville-Eagan-Savage School District just adopted a new transgender student policy, and experts say, legal experts I should say that this policy will permit students to change their gender identity at school, and it will allow the district to conceal that info from the parents. So this idea is known as socially transitioning, meaning that, say your son decides that he's actually a girl. He wants to be acknowledged then as a girl in social situations, specifically at school, because that's where he goes a lot, right? And so the school can actually affirm that and even push that on a child, convince them that that's actually what they need to do, and not tell the parents at all. They're not legally bound to do that in this district anymore, which, as you can see, that has grave stakes for parental rights.
Yeah.
This is the statement that they issued. It's part of their new policy. They said, quote, "All students have a right to privacy, including the right to keep private one's transgender or gender expansive status at school."
Gender expansive.
Yeah.
What an absurd new invention.
And it's also...
I haven't even heard that one before. Have you?
No, I haven't.
Gender expansive. What does that mean? I'm sorry, but is that something different than transgender? Transgender is I identify as either the opposite sex from what I was born with, or non-binary. That's the other one. I'm not either
Gender
one.
expansive. Maybe that includes being a furry now.
Oh, maybe it does. Ooh.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Gulp.
Who knows? Yeah. Maybe it's I'm not a boy or a girl. I'm
a teddy bear.
On all levels except physical, I am a wolf.
Oh boy.
Remember that one?
I know. Yes, I do. It's so bad. We follow this account
That's a real person.
We follow this account called Libs of TikTok, and they post all the stuff that
that guy was in the Matt Walsh documentary.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought it was a Libs of TikTok one. The Matt Walsh documentary is really good though. It's What is a woman?
Yeah.
So good. Okay, so basically the policy is not only detrimental to parents, of course, and to children, but it's also going to be hurting all of the school personnel, all the people that work for the district, because they can be sued or fired if they do not basically abide by this new statute, whatever it is, policy, I should say. And so the district, though, they insisted upon giving a statement to Alpha News upon this, and the statement was, quote, nothing in the adopted guidelines takes away from parents' rights to information about their children.
So what that is called a lie. That's a lie.
You heard it here, folks.
they're saying something that everything about their policy, and this isn't the first school district to do this. We've seen this in school districts around the country. I think we talked about it in Madison, Wisconsin last year. Other school districts are doing this, and those school districts, they are lying. Lying is not just telling a willful untruth. It's also concealing the truth from someone who deserves to know the truth.
Right. And it's just
unbelievable.
It's a blatant lie. It's incredibly misleading for them to say that. And of course, the only reason they're saying that is because they're afraid. Obviously, if they said, yeah, we are taking away parental rights, everyone would be like, they're taking away parental rights. So they have to lie. Yeah. It's the same thing with the abortion debate. They call it, healthcare instead of murder, right? Because they need to pervert the language. So, the executive director of the Minnesota Parents Alliance pointed out this. She said, the policy instructs staff not to disclose any information that may reveal a student's transgender or gender expansive status to parents. Parents have become rightfully mistrustful of district leaders who tell them that parental rights are paramount after they have just quickly and quietly adopted a policy that excludes them from conversations about their own children. So she's just laying out what we just said. Yeah. They are purposefully covering this up. They're purposefully lying to us. And his name is Doug Seaton. He's the president of the Upper Midwest Law Center. So he's a lawyer or attorney. And he stated this. He said, schools must notify parents of any supposed decision by their minor children to change their names or gender identity, rather than implement or enable that decision, just as institutions are required to notify parents if the student wanted to get married, to emigrate, or to join the military, which I think is a great point. There are so many things we don't let minors do because why? Because minors are young, their brains are not fully developed, they are valuable, they are precious, they deserve our protection. And as parents, that is our fundamental role in their lives, is to protect our children. And so that's why kids can't do those things until they're not a minor anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And so he goes on to say, what is even more concerning is that many parents who have contacted the Upper Midwest Law Center about similar policies have reported that teachers, counselors, and administrators at a number of school districts are encouraging and soliciting transitions rather than simply responding, which of course is a huge problem because we've talked about this before on the podcast. This whole idea that you can change your gender is a social contagion for almost every child. If you are in a peer group and you feel a little uncomfortable with your own body and you feel a little bit out of place and you also feel like you don't stand out in the crowd, like people aren't applauding what you're doing, you're not the most popular person, you're kind of hidden behind the scenes, and you see your friends coming out as bi or just coming out and transitioning and getting all this approval for it, of course you are going to ask, maybe I'm unhappy because I'm in the wrong body. Actually, I want that approval too. And the teachers, when the teachers push that on students, that even just contributes to the social contagion. Mm-hmm. And so this new policy is devastating for parents, it's devastating for students, and it's devastating for the teachers that are going to be forced to comply with this. And so I think there's already some talk of this not being actually legal. So we'll see if they end up getting sued, because I don't think that this obviously doesn't seem legal to me. We'll see what happens, what goes down.
Yeah, we can't express a legal opinion, but I'm sorry to say that I've certainly seen this position or this policy stand up in other districts. Mm-hmm. I think that it's really interesting, the attorney pointed out, if the student says that they want to emigrate or something, mm-hmm. the district has to tell the parents. There's some type of legal requirement there.
Right.
And I think also, what does a good teacher do? Let's talk about that. A good teacher, if he or she sees someone in the classroom who is struggling, maybe they see, God forbid, signs of self-harm or something like that.
Or even not being able to read. Something like that.
Well, sure.
Right?
Yeah. But let me take something a little bit more serious as an example. So signs of self-harm, something like that, signs of depression. Mm-hmm. A good teacher, I don't know if teachers are required, I don't think they are required to say to a parent, to call a parent and say, I think your kid might be depressed. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's necessarily legally required by a teacher to do. However, a good teacher might do that. And I think, and it should do that, in fact, because teachers are not in loco parentis. Parents are the ultimate authority over the education of children. If you send your kids to school for education, then the teachers are exposed to those kids for 8 hours every day. Or 7 hours, whatever it is, and they may have information about how those kids are doing that should be passed on to the parents. So I just think, and you kind of said this, but it's just like we're really preventing teachers from being good teachers on this particular issue.
It's a great point.
If a teacher sees a student that he thinks is depressed, he can call the mom right now and say, "Hey, I think your son is depressed." And the mom can say, "Okay, let's help him." If the teacher sees that the student is identifying as transgender, he cannot call the mom and dad unless he is certain that the parents are already aware of this.
Or the student gives permission.
And I just think that gets in the way of adults who want to help children from helping the children and blessing the parents and helping the parents fulfill their biblical role.
Yeah, so if you are in Burnsville, get loud, especially if your children are in these schools. But even if not, you can get involved. Make sure you contact the board. Make sure you get involved on a local level. That's why it's so important to be involved in school meetings.
Absolutely. So Grace, thank you so much for talking about those two particular issues. I think people need to be so aware of what's going on both in the abortion debate globally and in the gender debate here in Minnesota. I wanted to talk about one of my favorite times of the year, which is Advent, and it's just so wonderful.
It is the most wonderful time of the year.
It is the most wonderful time of year. Now, historically, Advent is kind of like a penitential season. It's like a preparatory season, and I think that's something that we should also remember. Like, it's really easy to, I think, just start rejoicing right away. Start being like, it's December 25th already. I'm listening to Joy to the World. And you know what? I'm not going to tell you not to do that. Do whatever you want.
I'm listening to Christmas music since before Thanksgiving.
No, well, me too. But I actually do try to.
I do it if the snow is falling. If the snow is falling, then it's Christmas spirit.
Which is like also wonderful about living in Minnesota. Like, how do you even celebrate Christmas
Literally,
if you live in Arizona?
I was thinking about that driving here today. It was so icy, guys, on the roads. So much snow. We got like 6 inches 2 days ago. Yesterday?
I got 8 inches where I live.
8 inches. That's so much. So gorgeous. But imagine if you lived in like Alabama and you never get the snow globe vibes. I would be so sad.
No, I just don't think Christmas is real if you don't have snow. Like, I'm sorry. And I know, yes, of course.
Yes, blah. I know you're going to say that. Blah, blah, blah.
Snow, but
we are nerds, guys. We are nerds. We know this.
Okay. So staying on topic, I want to talk about what Advent is.
Sure.
So first of all, your church may or may not do Advent. It's a bigger thing in the more traditional sides of Christianity. I don't think it's something that you're told to do in the Bible, but it's a very big deal at my church, a Lutheran church. Grace is a Mormon, so I don't know how that...
I have no comment. Do you want to be a solo host in this podcast, Moses?
Okay,
that's what it sounds
I'm
like.
sorry, you have no comment, so you're not. So you're refusing to deny that allegation. Are you going to circle back with me about whether
I'll circle back.
Okay, Grace is going to circle back about whether.
We're so annoying sometimes. I'm sorry, you guys.
Okay, sorry. So the thing about Advent
I'm
is
Presbyterian, by the way.
Okay. Well, believe for you. Is that basically like being a Mormon?
No. But being a Lutheran is.
Okay, there we go.
It's like being a buffalo too, I've heard.
Yes, yeah. Lutherans on Twitter will often have a buffalo in their handle.
So
it's
weird.
very obscure why that. Okay. Advent. Sorry, guys. So it's the beginning of the church year. You might think, oh, that's kind of weird. The church has a year. Yeah, there's a liturgical year, and the first Sunday of Advent, which is this past Sunday, is the beginning of it. And the scripture passages in the lectionary for and if you're doing a devotional that is specific to this time of year, you'll read these passages. We'll read in Isaiah. Actually, the Advent readings that I have start in Genesis, and it starts in Genesis 1, but then it goes to Genesis 3, where God says to Adam that there will be a war between the offspring of the man and the offspring of the serpent. I guess he's saying that to the serpent. And the snake will bite your heel, but you will crush his head.
Sorry, I feel like you were losing your words for a minute.
I didn't quote it very well, did I?
I'm sorry.
I think we all know that verse.
Yes.
So the idea that there's a snake crusher, I think I'm quoting Kevin DeYoung there, and that isn't Adam. That is Jesus. That is the first messianic prophecy in Scripture that there will be a son of Adam who will crush the serpent's head. That is Jesus Christ. And so we just, through Advent, we celebrate and prepare our hearts to receive the Son of God, who, of course, has already come, has already saved us. But every year, I mean, for one thing, this is just so new to my 3-year-old. Like last year, she was just not old enough to interact with this really in much of a way. She's still not even that excited about opening presents herself. She always wants Daddy to do it. She's so funny.
That is so cute.
Yeah, but now this year she's getting more into it. So every year is new, and this is the new church year. So happy new church year, and we approach Christmas through Advent, this time of preparation. I guess the spiritual side of this would be to try to quiet your heart. It's a very busy time of year. A lot of cookies, a lot of caroling, a lot of Christmas parties. That's all wonderful. Of course, the not so wonderful part is all the consumerism, the way that our culture tries to debauch us into being the perfect consumer instead of the perfect worshiper of God. Sorry, just being a little controversial there. So, don't let Advent get taken away from you. Remember how wonderful and special it is that God sent his only Son, Jesus Christ, to be born of a virgin, to become man and fully God, to have his ministry on earth and to save us from our sins through his death and resurrection. It's an amazing thing, and it all starts in a real way with Advent. So I hope that we're all celebrating and remembering Advent in a really special way. Grace, what are you reading?
Yeah, wow, Moses, first of all, thank you so much. That was great. I love that. That was a great explanation of Advent.
You're absolutely welcome.
Love it. And also I feel much more in the Advent spirit too after that. So I am reading, I wonder if you've read this book. You have to tell me, The Mysterious Benedict Society by Trenton Lee Stewart. Have you read it?
I've heard of it. No.
So good. I should say I just finished it. I'm reading the second one now. I've already read them before. And I guess I should say, in all honesty, I'm listening to them.
That counts.
That counts. Okay, that counts.
I am not going to be one of the people. I listen to a lot of audiobooks too.
Okay.
I dislike when people say, well, audiobooks, that's not really reading.
It's like you are getting all the information. You're just using your eyeballs.
Some people definitely listen to audiobooks and they do not, it just does not register with them.
For me, it does.
Yeah.
It helps me.
Yeah.
For me, I like to do it when I'm cleaning or when I'm doing other stuff, and then or driving. I've been listening to it on the way here. So nice. And so love the series. Great children's series. It's kind of like a mix of Harry Potter, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It's been likened to both of those, kind of like a mix of it, but it's just a group of 4 kids that solve mysteries together. And yeah, great series. And it's just a nice, easy thing.
Kind of young adult.
Yeah, honestly, kids book. But
Sounds fun.
I like it given this time because I'm about to go into finals, and so I'm able to listen to that and kind of detox from everything else I'm thinking about and writing about.
That's awesome.
How about you though?
Still working on the Ink Black Heart. I'm zooming through it. I'm on page 700 now, but it's 1,000 pages long.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's such a
Are
big
you impressed
book.
by it so far?
I'm liking it more.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I said last week that I thought it was going to get better, and now it has gotten better. So they always do. They start slow, some of these books. Then 2 newer books that I'm reading. I'm reading Rites of Spring, The Great War and the Birth of the Modern Age by Modris Eksteins.
Rites of Spring?
Yeah. And it's the title is taken from Stravinsky's piece, The Rite of Spring, which premiered in 1913, right before the Great War. And it's like a ballet. And it's very controversial, even to this day, because it's kind of, it's very pagan. There's like a virgin sacrifice and everything. And it's so interesting. He's writing about, you know what, actually, I don't want to talk about that book now because I'm not super far into it.
And we're also running out of time, I think.
And we're running out of time. So I'll tell you about the other book I'm reading very quickly. It's called The Cave and the Light, Plato versus Aristotle and the Struggle for the Soul of Western Civilization.
The forms,
Yeah.
The good old forms.
Yeah, I you know what? I'm more than halfway. I'm almost done with this book.
The world of becoming.
Right. I'm almost halfway through, or almost done, and I still can't in one sentence tell you the difference between Plato and Aristotle, except by saying that Well, that's a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So grace is pointing upward for Plato and
Yeah.
downward for Aristotle. Yeah, because Plato is all about how each thing that exists, this table has a form.
Spiritual.
It participates. It even exists because it participates to some sense in the form of, in the true form of the best table on earth, or whatever. And us too. We
like
participate in the form of God. I guess maybe that would be like Christian Platonism. Anyway, and Aristotle's all about
Well, actually, Augustine
science
was very influenced by Plato and Neoplatonism, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
Very fascinating. Because Plotinus, who was a Neoplatonist, sorry, this is so nerdy.
No.
He was so influential and so close to the truth. He believed there was a one, and he called it the Father. Like, which is crazy. And he believed that all goodness, beauty, and truth came from that one and that Father, which is crazy because he was so close to Christianity. Yeah. And, of course, he fell short, but he was so close if you read his writings. And then Augustine comes along later and says, I really like this, but Christianity is the answer. So basically, use this philosophy and Christianity side by side. So.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Basically, this guy's... Okay, last thing I'll say about this. It's pretty good, but he's making this case like World War I. It wasn't because of nationalism. It was because of the war between Plato and Aristotle. And I'm like,
Dubious, yeah. Dubious.
So
on that note.
On that note.
Enjoy the snow, y'all.
Enjoy the snow. Stay safe out there. We're so grateful that you're watching and listening to The Family Beacon as we bring the second season in for a landing. We'll be
Is
done.
this our last episode?
No.
Okay,
We will be done with the second season before the end of the year.
Wow.
I think we're going to have to do a special Christmas episode.
Absolutely.
And then
we should get Santa hats. I'd be
sure,
so down.
Why not? We'll do a special Christmas episode, and then we'll be done, and then we'll come back sometime early in the new year with season 3 of the podcast, and we are just so grateful. I saw that our number of followers on Spotify has increased almost 60% this year. Yep, and
Incredible.
So we're really excited, so glad to have you guys along for the ride, so glad you guys are there with us. Remember, we're continuing to do our year-end giving challenge. If you give to Minnesota Family Council and Institute now, your gift will be doubled. And if you are a new donor, it will be tripled. So please go to mfc.org/donate. Support the work we do, fighting for life, family, and religious freedom here in Minnesota. And I am Moses Bradford. This is Grace Evans. Get the facts. Stand for truth.
Thanks for listening to or watching this episode of the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you're up to date on life, family, and religious freedom. You can follow us on Instagram at MN Family Council and subscribe to us on YouTube to watch our content. Get the facts, stand for truth.